Welcome back to my player piano restoration project and part 4 of the series, which includes me regulating and tuning the piano. To regulate a piano is to adjust all the parts so that they operate uniformly and efficiently. Now, the greatest difference between a new and a used piano is that the parts in the used piano have become worn and no adjustments have been made to compensate for the wear. Now, the simplest way to visualize this is to think of how you age. And doing tasks at age 60 is much different than at 20 years old. Your spine is compressed and you're shorter, and your joints and tendons are worn, causing your flexibility and energy to diminish. Now, you can't reach or jump as far or move as quickly. Now think of this 108-year-old piano with all its parts. Now, as parts in a piano wear, they no longer make proper contact with one another, compromising the action and its ability to perform. And this is even before it is tuned. If you look at this graphic of the piano action, you can easily see at least 20 points where it moves, and it can be impacted by a worn component or felt or even a bent wire. Now, some of the most important steps in regulating the piano occur where this part, the jack, interacts with the hammer butt. Now, when you replace worn components and felts in a piano, you have to make sure that all those parts fit together properly, meaning the distances between components must be regulated. Now, there are actually around 21 steps in total to regulate an upright piano action, and I will go over each one of these in excruciating detail. Just kidding. The intent of this video is not to review all of those steps, but to provide a brief overview of the key steps I did on this piano. Now, several sources give the steps in varying order, and in some cases, a prior step needs to be revisited after a later adjustment may alter it. Now, I'm sure some experts will tell me I did it incorrectly or in the wrong order, but at the end, my piano works. Actually, the first step is to replace any parts that are worn to the point that they cannot properly function, even if regulated, and I did that in my previous video. Now, there are several unique tools and measuring devices used to regulate a piano. One such device measures 3 different areas, and instead of purchasing the tool, I, wait for it, 3D printed one. Now, I use this tool first to measure the hammer strike distance, or the distance between the hammers at rest and the strings. Now, it should be at about 1.75 inches, or for you metric folks, 45 millimeters. And this is for old uprights like mine. Now, as you recall, I filed my hammer felts, so we would expect the gap on mine to be greater than 45 millimeters, and it was. The good news is this gap is easily corrected by placing hard felt material on the brackets under the cushions here that are on the bottom of the hammer rail. Now, it didn't take much to get it to the correct gap as measured by my handy dandy 3D tool. Now, we will get back to the other 2 uses for this tool, but for now, the next step I did was regulate lost motion. Now, lost motion is the gap between the top end of each jack and the buckskin glued to the underside of the hammer butt. Now, too much gap, and it means the key must move too far before the jack begins pushing on the hammer butt, and this results in poor control of adding intensity, soft or loud playing into the note. Now, if the jack is too high with no gap, the hammer butt will prevent the jack from slipping back under the butt and results in the note not playing next time the key is depressed. Now, this lost motion is regulated by turning the capstan at the back of each key, counter or clockwise depending on the gap. To determine if there is lost motion, I slightly winked the key to see when the hammer moves, which indicates when the jack engages the hammer butt. If there is more than 1/32 inch or 0.5 millimeter of play before the hammer engages, it means I need to raise the capstan to reduce the gap. And if the hammer is sitting off the rail or moves at the touch of the key, I need to lower the capstan to increase the gap. Now, I revisited this step to verify none of the later steps changed the gap. The next step was leveling the white keys. If I got down to eye level, I could see some differences in height, but it's much easier to just use a long straight edge like here and quickly see gaps where some keys are lower. If the keys were too low, like I had here, I had to add paper punchings of varying thicknesses underneath the balance rail felts. Now, it's definitely trial by error because a 0.02 inch gap does not correspond to a 0.02 inch thick punching. Once I found the correct thickness of punching, a quick check shows if I got it right. Now after leveling the white keys, I took a look at the black or sharp keys. They appeared close enough, so I didn't make any adjustments there. I did key dip next. Now this step impacts the next one called hammer let off. So this key dip is often revisited if the let off distance can't be regulated. Now key dip is simply the distance the key moves down until it stops on the front rail punching. The distance should be about 3/8 inch or 10 millimeters. Never to lose out on an opportunity to make a jig, I 3D printed a handy 10 millimeter thick key dip block to measure the key dip. And basically, I place the block on each key to press and see if there's any difference between the top of it and the adjacent keys. In all cases, the key dip was more than 10 millimeters, so I needed to add punchings under the felts of the front rail to get the correct distance. As noted earlier, the next step was hammer let off. Now let off ensures the hammer properly bounces off the strings to get the right tone. Now this best can be described in this video. When each key is depressed slowly, the hammer should move to within 1/8 inch or 2 to 3 millimeters of the strings and then fall back or let off when the jack slips out from under the hammer butt. To measure this let off distance, let me reintroduce you to my little friend, where this distance is about 2.5 millimeters. To decrease the let off distance so the hammer moves closer to the strings before the jack trips, I need to raise the let off regulating screw. Shown here by turning it clockwise with this special screwdriver that fits over the eye of the regulating screw. Now, to increase the let off distance, I lowered the screw by turning clockwise. Now this needed to be done for all 88 keys. Regulating hammer checking distance to 5/8 inch or 16 millimeters is next, and this is the distance that the hammer comes to a rest from the strings when the key is played moderately hard and held. This distance is regulated by this piece here, the catcher, and the distance to the back check. And this brings us to the final use of our 3D tool, where this distance is 5/8 inch. Now I control this distance by bending the wire at the back check either closer to or further away from the catcher. The last step I did was regulate the damper spoons. So each damper begins to lift when the depressed key reaches about half the distance to the strings. Now supposedly the preferred method is to regulate the spoons with the piano action in the piano by bending the spoons with a special tool with a special name, the spoon bender. Bet you didn't guess that. I'm not in the Matrix, so I 3D printed one. Wait a sec. This tool was a little more complicated than I had time for, and I didn't want to purchase one just for this occasion, so I measured the movement of each damper with it in the piano to see which ones needed adjusting, marked them, and then removed the action and made adjustments to the spoon, reinserted and rechecked. I had to do this a couple times to get them correct. Now, after this step, I went back to test each key to validate the feel, lost motion, let off, key dip, and back checking. For a 108-year-old piano with some new parts, I felt like I did a decent job. So let's fire this baby up and see how she sounds. Let's go through the notes. I don't know about you, but I thought that sounded pretty good. Yeah, right. So we obviously got some work to do on this piano. It hasn't probably been tuned for 50, 60 years. So I knew it was going to take more than a couple tunings. My piano technician friend, Austin, said I could probably do a decent job tuning it myself using a program called TuneLab. So that is what I did. Now, without getting into all the theory of tuning, this program does all the hard work in the background and calculates a tuning curve for your piano. Now, tuning is a long and laborious task because there are 208 strings to tune, and I ended up doing 3 tunings. One to get the keys close to the right pitch, then another to get close, and then a final to dial it in. Now, this was the tune after the second tuning. Hopefully that sounded much better to you. After the final tuning, our contractor happened to stop by to get some measurements on a project we were doing, and he saw the piano and decided to play a little tune. It's one thing to hear a scale being played on the piano, it's another to hear a cool song played on it. He said it felt and sounded good, and that was all I needed to hear. This player is ready for final assembly and showtime. Enjoy the music and see you soon.